Monday. Red Polly. Dusty. Blue Poncho. Tupac. Street.
Welcome back to episode 4 of the Frisky podcast with yours truly, Tyler Z, and of course, the master of bets, Willie P, with us today. Will, we are close, man. The season is almost fully upon us. We are through the preseason football time, and week 1 is just around the corner, man. I know you have to be feeling good about that.
I do feel really good. It's nice to have football be right around the corner. It was crazy watching week 0 of college football last weekend. Funny enough, all of those underdogs in week 0 covered the spread, which was outrageous, especially because my Montana State Bobcats were favorites on the road as an FCS school and did not cover the –
Come on, Bobcats.
Yeah, and they won. They were losing that whole game and ended up winning, which was a beautiful thing. But the whole time I was like, how are these guys 2 touchdown favorites? And, of course, they did not cover the spread, which I don't care because we're 1-0 and New Mexico is 0-1. So – great way to start the year, but yeah, it's I'm still pinching myself that this Thursday night we got a football game and it's no longer preseason. We got the big dogs coming out to play, which is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, man, we got college football is crazy too. If we take a step back to that, Florida State going down number 10 right off the rip after their big controversy, I guess you can say, last season. Now to go take the first L of the season, man, that's tough for sure for them. But we do have a 12-man playoff this year, so they could still make it. If you're going to losing early is definitely the way to go because you can always come back if you can string those wins together. So we'll see how they put it all together. They should be able to get through the ACC if they can figure it out. The first game's always tough. You just never know what's going to happen. Team's not always meshed great yet. So we have the same thing to look forward to when the regular season starts here for the NFL. See which teams mesh early, which ones take a little bit of time. But to get us started with that, I know we're going to start this episode a little bit different. Usually we end with some bets, but this week we are going to start with some money line and spread bets, Will, and then we're going to end with some player props. So the floor is yours, my friend. Tell us how we can make that money.
I hate this in my betting career because I hate to flip-flop on picks, but I'm going to flip-flop on picks. I told you last time that I'm taking Colts money line, and we had a little bit of a feud about it. I purely was taking this based off of the hype, I'll be honest, the hype that was surrounding AR-15 and the Colts. Since then, I've seen him play 3 preseason games, as we all have, if you were watching the preseason. And I do not feel nearly as good about him now. Not saying that he won't have a good year, but to start the season, I'm gonna go back to what you did, and we're gonna go with Texans money line. It hasn't moved at all. That is one thing I also was checking in on throughout our past 2 weeks since our last episode, and none of the bets that I gave you last show have moved at all, except for that Jets plus 5.5 has now moved to 4.5. So against the Niners, so on Monday night, but I like Texans money line. I came back to earth a little bit, woke up, cleared the mind from AR-15, if you will. He obviously has a small sample size, so that doesn't make me feel as good as well. But in those 3 preseason games, he went 10 for 18 for 111 yards, a touchdown, and a very horrible pick 6. So granted, it's preseason, but my thinking here is the reason for the flip-flop. If you're not playing that well in the preseason, I get that he's coming back from a big injury, but if you can't dice up the fourth and fifth strings, I don't know how you're going to do, at least in week 1, against one of the best teams in the NFL, in the Houston Texans, and their stellar defense. So we're going to go Texans on the money line, minus 126. It's probably going to move, I'm sure, once we get closer to Sunday, so I'd take it as soon as you can just to keep some value. But
I would, a little caveat, I still do think that Anthony Richardson is going to be a good fantasy pickup because I think you can get him in late rounds. I think, like you said, he's come back from an injury. It's going to take a little bit of time. I think he will eventually get there. He's still going to be a stellar QB this season, I believe. But, dude, it's hard to go against the Texans when you look at that offensive lineup, man, and their defensive lineup, to be honest. But they should be able to, like you said, dice up some defenses, man. CJ Stroud, and then when you look at his weapons, they just got it. It's like you picked who you want to cover at the end of the day because that's tough. So I get it. I get the backpedal a little bit.
I was feeling so good and home dog, and man, I don't know. He put a sour taste in my mouth, at least for week one, and taking him on the money line. So we'll see what happens. I'm sure, who knows? We'll see. That's the beauty of betting. But I'm going to go with your fourth odd in Texans money line right off the bat. The next one, I will continue my trend of buying into the hype, but I think it's valuable and I think it's justified. I'm going Broncos plus 5.5 at Seattle. Bo Nix.
Broncos plus 5.5. You're riding the boat.
I am riding the Bo Nix train purely because the Seahawks, I do not think will be as good as they were last year. Mike McDonald is a great defensive-minded coach, but they have lost a lot of pieces in their secondary, as well as I'm just curious to see how Geno Smith and this offense works with a more defensive-minded coach scheming that up, all that jazz. I also think the Broncos, granted, they went undefeated in the preseason, which doesn't mean a whole lot because, again, it's against the dudes trying to make the roster or get a job. But Bo Nix looks comfortable already in Sean Payton's offense. That offense looks exactly schemed around to fit his abilities and what he's good at and really highlight those abilities that he can do. I like so far what he's done. I'm sure we'll see what happens when Bo Nix gets under the big lights and his heart gets going a little bit since he's finally realizing and fulfilling his dream of being an NFL quarterback. But I think 5.5 is a reasonable number. I don't think the Seahawks blow out the Broncos by any means. I think, if anything, the Seahawks will win by 3. Again, do I think the Broncos win outright? Probably not, but I think they can at least keep it close in a revenge game for them from last year. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
We'll talk about this a little bit later, but what I am excited about in that game is to see how Ryan Grubb does. Obviously, was at Washington with DeBoer last year. Great offensive mind there, just crushed it. And I was really hoping that he went with DeBoer to Alabama, which he did for a half of a second before he got the job in Seattle. And now having some of the guys that they have, and like I said, we're going to talk about it during our fantasy section, it will be interesting to see what he can do with those guys. And we don't really know yet, right? So this is a toss-up pick because if I had to lean to one side, I think I would lean the other way a little bit just because I love what Ryan Grubb did. And like I said, I wanted him at Alabama really bad because I was like, we need a fantastic offensive coordinator there after last season but now at Seattle, it'll be interesting to see what he can do with those guys. 100%. So that'll be a good game to watch. I'm really excited to see how those teams start off their years.
Yeah, me too, especially because after the first 3 preseason games, I've made plenty of bets with friends and family for the Broncos to not make the playoffs, and they are so high on Bo Nix and just drinking the Kool-Aid that I am hopefully going to cash out on a lot of money at the end of the year because at least when I made these bets 2 weeks ago before week 2, the Broncos were minus 1,400 to miss the playoffs, and I had family and friends no doubtedly saying we were going to win 10 games, and I just Vegas knows, and they obviously don't know how to read lines and handicap, and that shows you enough that no matter how much hype is around Bo Nix, we'll see. I hopefully the Broncos can get over their win total this year, but I don't think they'll do much more than 6 wins. That's for sure.
I think Nix will come back to earth. I think you'll be all right, but we'll see.
You never know. You never know.
If you can throw a couple of checkdowns and go for touchdowns.
You could do that. You could definitely do that, especially with Jaleel McLaughlin in the backfield. That's definitely a realistic possibility. And then my final money line spread bet for week 1, I like Saints minus 4. They're starting the year out against the Panthers. The reason why I like this the most is the Carolina Panthers were the worst team against the spread in 2023. I know this is a new season. Anything can change. I'm sure Bryce Young will play much better than he did last year, and I think that was a big reason why is they could just not put up points, so they couldn't keep their defense in the game. But I like the Saints to cover the 4 points, especially at home. And I'm waiting to see what the Panthers are going to be this year. I don't think they're going to be a decent team at all. They should probably get 4th in the NFC South, as well as probably be a bottom 3 team again, just because they have so much to build off of. That being said, their new head coach in Canales has revitalized 2 quarterbacks' careers in Geno Smith and Baker Mayfield last year before coming to the Panthers. So maybe he will be the guy to figure Bryce Young out and get him the tools that he needs to be successful. But I like the Saints to cover the spread in week 1. especially with Derek Carr coming back healthy. I think that'll be good for them and get some quality quarterback play, at least more consistent than what they had. So, yeah.
I would probably agree with you on this one. What I will say is I think the Panthers, they've revamped their O-line
Sure.
this offseason
And
some.
defense.
I think they're probably mid-tier now. I think that's fair to say. O-line, they're probably in the somewhere between 17 to 20, something in like that in the ranking-wise. So that gives me a little bit more confidence in the Panthers than I had last year. I am 100% on the hater train of Derek Carr. I don't think I just think he knows how to blow games. But with that said, Alvin Kamara, Chris Olave, these are some guys that are good players for sure and can definitely make things happen. So I would agree with you on the overall bet, though I think the Panthers have a little bit more going for them this year than they did, like you said. But will it be enough? That's the question.
Thing too.
I hope so. For
They
Bryce
did.
Young's
The Panthers
sake.
did rank 25th in defensive efficiency last year, but they did also have the second most injuries on defense all year. So obviously that doesn't go that goes hand in terms of not being successful. They did also get Jadeveon Clowney this offseason, as well as a couple other guys in their secondary. So we'll see, but yeah, I don't. 1 week, it is a divisional game as well, but I think the Saints had a disappointing season last year. I think Derek Carr, in some sense, has something to prove. I don't love Derek Carr either. I think he should be in an emo band instead of being a starting NFL quarterback, but he can have flashes, especially now that he's fully healthy again. I think he at least can cover 4 points. That doesn't seem too unrealistic for me, but you never know. We'll see.
We will see. There are your 3 money line / spread bets here from the man himself. Let's talk some NFL news, man. The biggest headline of recent is CeeDee Lamb getting paid finally. They waited long enough, but now he's got a 4-year, $136 million deal, $100 million guaranteed, $38 million signing bonus. So we're looking at $34 million annually about, which puts him up there as the second highest, just under Jefferson. Let me get your thoughts first on it. I want to hear your thoughts, and then we'll see if I agree. So what's your thoughts on this?
Like you said, it took long enough. In my opinion, it's about damn time. I don't know why they've even thought about waiting this long. Of course, Jerry Jones yesterday said that there's not a better fit for the position for the Cowboys, which I think is a whole nother can of worms that we could open later. Long story short, I think Jerry Jones is the reason why the Cowboys have not won a Super Bowl in however long, because he's not a very good GM. I'm glad that they finally paid him. I think he's worth every penny. I think it's an absolute no-brainer, especially if you are thinking about moving on from Dak Prescott after this year, depending on how the season goes. You need a guy like CeeDee Lamb to be in that offense, and if you are going to either draft a young rookie quarterback next year or bring someone in free agency, who doesn't want to have that dude as your wide receiver one? You know what I mean? So he's an absolute unit. Again, I think Tyreek missed 2 games last year, and CD played every single game. But regardless, CD was 50-plus yards short of what Tyreek ended with receiving yards last year, and he ended with the most catches in the league. So I think it was a no-brainer, and I'm glad that we don't have to talk about this anymore besides today.
I agree with you, man. I mean, it's no doubt that football's gotten ridiculous in these contracts. 4 years, $136 million is insane. But from where the wide receiver market is, yeah, I am fully on board with it. If you're going to pay someone, pay CeeDee Lamb. Like you said, that's a good point that, yes, he may have been 50 short and played every game, but the fact that he played every game is huge, right? Reliable. You look at someone like Justin Jefferson, amazing wide receiver, missed a ton of games, right? CeeDee Lamb was out there. He was putting in the work. 12 touchdowns last season, 1,749 yards. That is a guy that you want on your side when you take that field. He's that team, in my opinion, right now. Dak Prescott is a great quarterback in the regular season. We'll put that caveat in there. But he wouldn't be who he was without CeeDee Lamb. He is his number one target. And I think if you put another quarterback in the Dallas system, he's going to have big numbers with CeeDee Lamb out there. I don't know if Dak Prescott would have huge numbers like he did if CeeDee Lamb wasn't out there. And so I think, when you're comparing the two, I think CeeDee Lamb is the guy. And so I'm happy he finally got his money, and we can all draft him in fantasy and don't have to worry about whether or not he's going to get paid.
100%. I'm just looking at the list of the highest paid wide receivers on a per year basis, at least the top 7. Obviously, it's Justin Jefferson at 35 and then CD at 34. But if you go down the list, 5 and 6, it is remarkable to me. And we talked about this a couple of episodes ago that Tyreek Hill is number 5 at 30 and Jalen Waddle is 6 at 28-25. That is incredible to me that the Dolphins are shelling out that much money to their 2 wide receivers. I get it. They're both phenomenal players. I'm not saying they're not worth it, but man, we'll see what happens. And a lot of questions are around that offensive line for the Dolphins, and can they hold on enough for Tua to make throws and not get beat up too much?
Well, think how much they paid Tua.
Yeah. They're going all in on that offense, which I get. It's very explosive. They put up 70 plus on my Broncos last year. But man, if Tua keeps getting hit, and we talked about this the other week, who knows what's going to happen, man? And maybe you need to put it other places. But again, I'm not an NFL GM. So what? The Dolphins are going to put up the most points in the league by a mile this year, and then they're going to call me and say, hey, can you quit barking at us? You know what I mean? So we'll see. But I was looking at that yesterday when Schefter tweeted it, and I just kept racking my brain. I was like, that is insane to me that they're paying their 2 wide receivers $60+ million a year. It's just remarkable.
They're shelling it out. They're saying, give me the points over stopping the other team. I'll take the points.
Defense.
Let's have a shootout. Pac-12
yeah.
style.
Oh, yeah. Pac-12 at night. That's probably what his scheme book is called for the Dolphins this year. And especially the way Mike McDaniel looks now, man. It looks like he's been Pac-12 after night every night of the off season, if you know what I mean. My God. I love it. I love the look, but I never would have. Him looking like that was not on my bingo card for the 2024 season.
He's a chameleon, man. Fits in where he's at. Come on in and find your place. He's killing it. On the opposite side of great contracts and having your guy on the field is not having your guy on the field. And unfortunately, there are some teams and some players who are going to be dealing with that initially. The biggest one, of course, is Nick Chubb. We all know what happened to him last game. There was some kind of back and forth you saw coming out of their camp over there in Cleveland in this offseason. Was he going to be ready to play in those first couple of games, or was he not? Eventually, they made the decision to keep him on that PUP list. Some other notable names, TJ Hawkinson, Jonathan Brooks out of Texas, the rookie, who we've talked a lot about, and who I still think, if you can stash him on your bench for when he comes back, could be a league winner later on. But Bradley Chubb, Tyler Higbee, Kendrick Bourne, all starting the season out on that PUP list, meaning that they're going to miss the first 4 games. All of those guys are recovering from ACLs or multi-ligament knee injuries, so it's no surprise. Most of them were late injuries last season. They're all coming on that 9-10 month recovery right now. NFL, with the caliber you have to play, minus the superhuman Adrian Peterson type guys, usually take at least 10 to 12 months to return from something like that. So it's not a huge surprise, but definitely a little bit of a blow with some of those guys, and makes choosing your fantasy team a little bit more difficult, because it's, hey, can I wait on him now that he's not playing in the first 4, but might be someone good to grab later when everyone's not thinking about him? Because when 4 games comes around and he's back, if he does come back, well, now you're in the driver's seat.
And you don't win your fantasy week in weeks 1 through 4. So even if you have a bad start, 1-3, 0-4, there's still hope. It's tough, especially in bigger leagues, but it has been done. I've done it. It's not a fun way to start the year, but you never know. You need that knight in shining armor. All of a sudden, Nick Chubb's back. Boom. You never know. That being said, too, I'm going to talk about him later, but even though Nick Chubb isn't there right now, I do like Jerome Ford and what he's going to bring to the table. We'll get to that in a minute. But the Browns' rushing offense should be not just fine, but I think they'll still be able to contribute for sure. But it is always a bummer to see such a high-quality player, Nick Chubb, go down. And obviously, we'd all love to see him play week 1, but obviously makes sense given the severity of that injury. So I'm still having flashbacks of him doing that to his knee, and I was like, that's outrageous. The fact that they showed it on TV, like right away. Normally they're very good at not showing it, and they did, and I was like, oh man, dude. So anyway, but
Yeah, that's his second injury on that side. I
I
think.
remember you saying that last
Second
year.
CL on that left side. Plus, he had the one on the right, so that's tough. Yeah.
Yeah.
At what point do you hang it up?
It's like J.K. To go off the tracks a little bit. It's J.K. Dobbins. I forgot that he went to the Chargers, and I was looking at some PPR ranks this morning, and he was the bottom of the league, and I was like, I would not touch him with a 30-foot pole. I don't care. He could have the career year this year, but anything's a career year for him because he isn't. I don't think he's ever played a full season. Maybe he has one.
But you grab Chubb though, even after his
100%.
multi-legs.
Proof's in the pudding with Nick Chubb. We know what he can do. There's no pudding for proof. I hate to say it, but the fact that he is still on an NFL roster is outrageous to me. But then again, so is Cam Akers, and he looked pretty decent in the preseason, so you never know. But man,
Yeah, Achilles for Cam. That was a tough one to come back from, but he had some games where he showed out. So it's not unheard of with modern day medicine. They're getting better, man. People are coming back. It's not career ending as much anymore, but still tough. I don't know if we'll see Chubb back to his last few years self ever again, to be honest. But maybe he surprises us. So we'll see. But if you can get him in later rounds, I'd say he's definitely worth picking him up.
100%.
I would wait on him, but definitely someone.
Maybe too, if you want to get real shisty, maybe he has a good week. One of his first weeks back, just dish him for some value, get him out. You never know. There's a lot of hypotheticals.
Yeah, get something for him.
We'll see.
Yep, 100%. Someone that lost their running back early.
So always have to have one in the chamber, you know. And speaking of one in the chamber, that's what the Steelers have, but it's two in the chamber. It's clogged up, and they don't know what to do. The gun's jammed, and it's looked like they've never been to the firing range before. I don't know. My question to you, Tyler, is what do you do here if you're Mike Tomlin? Because they've been pretty adamant about Russell Wilson being their starter, even though he's had a pretty up and down preseason, even though Justin Fields has not given me any reason, at least to me, why he should be their starter. And my question to you is, do you stick with Russell Wilson, given his veteran ability, and been there, done that? Granted, his last couple of seasons with the Broncos were pretty piss poor. Last year, he actually had a pretty good year statistically, basing it off of his first year with the Broncos. But do you go with the kind of the vet presence, or do you let this young gunslinger in Justin Fields kind of take the reins and run?
Yeah, so from what I'm seeing, it still seems Russell Wilson's going to be starting week one. I think that's what we're going to see. They haven't officially said it yet, but just by what he's done in the preseason, when he's pulled Wilson, and I think that's who we are going to see under center week one. With that said, my opinion is that he will and should be on a pretty short leash. I think Wilson's probably the right decision. The reason I say that is Fields is, to me, definitely more athletic. He definitely has a higher upside in some ways. He can extend plays a little bit better, I think, because he's still young and he can move around in that backfield and extend those. However, when you see him in preseason, you definitely have seen still some of those youngster mistakes. And that's where it worries you a little bit. I think working under Russ for a season would actually be very good for him. I think he'd learn a lot. If Russell Wilson just cannot bring it together, then I don't think Tomlin has anything to lose by putting Fields in. It's not, at the end of the day, it's not the worst problem to have. It's not like he has two just absolute trash QBs. I think where Russell is and where Fields is, they're both somewhat mid right now in their careers. Like Russ used to be that top guy and he's fallen a little bit. I think Fields is learning. He has, like I said, a higher ceiling eventually here, but I think you start Wilson and see where it goes. I think that's the right decision.
I agree with that 100% as well, especially given that the Broncos are paying the majority of the salary this year, and they're paying, I think, in $1.02 million this year. Like you said, what do you have to lose? You don't have – the only thing you really have to lose is your undefeated streak of – or not undefeated – your streak of having a winning season in Mike Tomlin, which I'm sure low-key he really cares about. But in the grand scheme, it's not like you're, getting in a bunch of dead cap space or something, or your championship window is closing, something major. So yeah, I agree. I mean, it seems like Russell Wilson just can't seem to figure it out in a sense. Like he just keeps taking bad sacks and stuff like that. But then again, too, it's also his first season there. So in the Fields, obviously, their growing pains are expected. You got to give him somewhat of the benefit of the doubt. And if anybody's going to get in your face and hopefully wake you up a little bit, it would be Mike Tomlin. We'll see. I have a lot of people saying they like George Pickens a lot this year, and that he's at least in a mid-round floater. You'll see later. I don't think that will be the case, but we'll get to that after this. But yeah, we'll see. I don't know. We'll see. The Steelers are interesting to me this year, especially because the AFC North is going to be a tough division, and I think they're going to have a hard time scraping out some division wins for sure.
No, I agree. I think if there's a coach, though, that I don't ever really go hard against his decisions, I feel like he's shown that he looks at every decision from every angle, thinks about it hard. And I know every coach would say that they do that, but there are some coaches that you see some of the decisions they make and you're like, what? That's what you decided on? But with him, I feel like whatever he chooses is probably the right decision, man, to be honest. Like he's got it. He has it figured out. I think it will be Russell Wilson, like I said, but we'll see. Now we get to have a little bit of fun. We got two good segments, two good fantasy segments. We got our top 5 middle round fantasy targets for you. So people we think that you can grab in those rounds 4, 5, all the way to around 10, somewhere in there in your fantasy drafts that have some great upside and not a ton of downside. And then, of course, we have the new segment, the way too high ADP, the guys who are just out of control with where people think that they should be drafted, and we're wondering what in the hell people are thinking. Let's start with our middle round fantasy targets. Will, start us off, buddy.
I don't know why I feel like this one is so obvious, but it's got to be Joe Burrow at 62. Come on. I get he had a terrible year last year. He couldn't stay out of the frickin' blue tent. I get it. Weeks 1 through 4, what was it? He averaged like 8 fantasy points a game, obviously because he was limping around with that bad calf, all that jazz. Weeks 5 through 10, though, averaged almost 22 points once he was feeling a little healthier before he hurt that ligament in his throwing wrist. I like Joe Burrow a lot to have a bounce back year. I know we talked about it our first episode a little bit on it whenever. I think if Joe Burrow's fallen to an ADP of 62 or a little higher, I don't know why you wouldn't scoop him up in the 5th or 6th round as your quarterback, especially because a lot of these guys like Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Pat Mahomes are going to go much earlier, as they should. But I think for the upside that Joe Burrow has and his ability to have a bounce back year, which I think he is going to do, especially like we talked about a couple of weeks ago with that fresh new haircut, I think taking Joe Burrow at 62 or anywhere from 55 to 62 is outrageous to me. I think he should be a much higher ADP, but he's not. So, yeah, I would take Joe Burrow in a heartbeat, no question about it, even if Jamar Chase is jerking around and not doing his thing and fighting for this contract and all that jazz. I think Joe Burrow has too much upside, especially now that he's fully healthy.
They got their boys back, right? They got Higgins back too. So he's there, ready to go. So yeah, dude, I would agree with that. I like that. Joe Burrow doesn't really let you down very often when he's on the field.
No.
As long as he's healthy.
I was just saying, last year
last year
it was just like I feel like everybody's got a sour taste in their mouth about him, and it was like, listen, dude, he could barely move in the pocket. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that was a lingering injury that they tried to bring him back a little bit fast, I think. And then obviously the wrist thing was a whole different issue, but that calf was definitely he never fully recovered from that, which he should be by now. So. Alrighty, first on my list at ADP 72, Evan Ingram. Evan Ingram, tight end Evan Ingram. I've had him on my fantasy team before actually, and he has crushed it for me every time I've put him in. The reason I like Evan Ingram is he ended up with just under 1,000 yards last season, 963. Not crazy great by any means in the end zone area. He only had 4 touchdowns, but he did that last year with Calvin Ridley. Ridley's gone now. He's at Tennessee. They got Gabe Davis instead, and Gabe Davis is obviously a very good receiver. We've seen him in Buffalo. He tends to be a little bit streaky, though,
100%.
inconsistent, and I don't think he is Calvin Ridley caliber. So I think that will help Evan Ingram out. Of course, you have ETN in the backfield, so you're worried about some target share stuff with him coming out. But Trevor Lawrence just got paid. He can throw the ball. I don't care what anyone says. He knows how to throw the ball. And Evan Ingram he's a tough dude. When he was with the Giants, it was brutal to watch him. But ever since he has been in Jacksonville, I think he's done great. He showed resiliency, and I like him. I like him at 72. If you can get him later, obviously great. But I think there's like tiers of tight ends. And if you don't get one of those top guys that everybody wants, I think you still have a good shot with Evan Ingram, putting him in your lineup every week in and week out.
I like that a lot. Tight ends have always been the team killer in the draft. I feel there's never like a plethora of good tight ends, but if you can find that guy that's at least consistent enough to get you 8 to 10 points a week, that's huge in fantasy football for sure. Obviously, there's not nearly as many of them, but my God, the amount of times I've either had my tight end get hurt or I waited too long to get a decent tight end in the draft, and then I end up with either switching them out every week, or I'm counting on a dude that averages 3 fantasy points a week, and that just doesn't work. I like that a lot for sure. I'm going to go a little out of order, but going off tight ends, I feel the same way, but I like Jake Ferguson for the Cowboys. His ADP is 85, so around there as well. He had 81 receptions on 108 targets last year. I love that number of the 108 targets for a tight end. That's crazy to me. They seem to really like to use the Cowboys really like to use him in the red zone last year, which is obviously very good for touchdown chances. And he also led all tight ends in red zone yards in 130 last year, and ranked top 5 in first downs and touchdowns for tight ends last year. So I don't know what more you need to hear in terms of stats wise. I mean, like I just said, it's hard enough to get a guy that can get you points, and if you can get a guy like Jake Ferguson who helped lead, was top 5 in touchdowns and first downs last year, that means he's one, getting a pretty solid target share, and 2, he's getting a solid target share in the red zone. So I like Jake Ferguson a lot, especially at ADP 80. I think he's going to go under the radar a little bit, especially maybe now that CeeDee Lamb has gotten paid. Obviously, he's going to get his target share no matter what. But I could see Jake Ferguson being kind of option maybe number 3 for Dak Prescott this year, especially now since Michael Gallup's gone and they've had a lot of turnover at the wide receiver position.
Yeah, I like anyone who is on the receiving end for the Cowboys right now. Obviously, Dak is looking for a new contract, and so he had a great season last year from a regular season from a stat perspective, and he is going to be trying to match that this year to show how important he is to that team. To be honest with you, Ezekiel Elliott in the backfield doesn't really do it for me anymore. I think they're going to rely on that passing game. So, yeah, man, if you can get him, you can get him low. It could be a big steal. Next on my list at ADP 126.
Let's go.
My man. 126. Give me Chuba Hubbard.
Oh, man.
Buddy. Hubbard, 902 yards last season on an abysmal offense. 5 touchdowns. They have strengthened their offensive line. We know this. They talked about it this morning, and we just talked about it. Jonathan Brooks is first 4 games at least out, which means that Hubbard, he was first string anyway, but now it's a big drop off. So, yeah, they're only bringing him out when he needs a rest. I don't think Bryce Young is Mr. Mobile quarterback here. I like where Hubbard is. I think he's a strong back. If he stays healthy, I think they're going to rely on him a lot. And at ADP 126, sign me up. Sign me up. For a starter at 126 that I know is going to get the ball, lock him in.
I love that as well, just purely based off the volume he will get initially. What more do you want? The worst for a running back is running back by committee, and he is obviously not in a committee, so I'm jotting that one down for sure. That could be a little sneaky league winner, if you will, maybe. Oh, who's your third best player? Oh, it's Chuba Hubbard. People be like, no, it wasn't. Be like, okay, here you go. Here are the numbers. You know what I mean?
got him in round 10 or 11.
That'll be something you screenshot when you get your league recap for the year. I like that a lot. Hopefully he can stay healthy. The one thing I am worried about the Panthers, and granted it's a completely different coaching staff since they've had McCaffrey, is, but obviously their reputation in the near past is they do like to overwork running backs. Granted, it's a whole other situation with Christian McCaffrey, and that's a whole other thing. And I don't think Canales will do that as much, but we'll see. But I like Hubbard, especially at that ADP. That's outrageous to me as well. Moving into that, another running back. I've been kind of going back and forth with this guy because he has burned me in the past, but he's also been very productive, and that is Aaron Jones with the Vikings.
Oh, okay.
Aaron Jones, ADP 64. I think you're going to see him coming around, probably around the turn at either 5 or 6, unless some Vikings fan gets shysty early in your draft and just can't let go of a Packers fan can't let go of the old memories. Anyway, granted, he did miss 6 games last year, which isn't bode for my argument, at least to start the argument. But I think he has a lot of high volume potential in this Vikings offense, especially with Darnold now being their quarterback. Even if J.J. McCarthy was going to be their starting quarterback, the Vikings are going to have to run the ball, at least be able to establish the run, especially if they want to get Justin Jefferson open downfield. Because if they're just throwing the ball all game, it's not going to work. And again, I'm not the biggest believer in Sam Darnold. He's been in the league long enough. We have a big enough sample size of what he does as a starter. It's nothing special. If he is going to turn into something at least productive and serviceable, they're going to have to run the ball, and who can do that pretty well and consistently? It's Aaron Jones, as well as being a target out of the backfield. That's why I like Jones a lot. And the big thing for them, too, is the Vikings were 29th in total rushing yards last year and 31st in rushing touchdowns. Obviously, Alexander Mattison was arguably the biggest flop of the fantasy season last year, especially after Dalvin Cook left. A lot of people thought he was going to be an absolute workhorse and was not. So I think Aaron Jones is a much better player than Alexander Mattison. And he did finish 2023 with at least 14-plus fantasy points in 3 straight games. So he's coming off a good end of the season. Honestly, he's on a new team, but I think he's going to be utilized a lot early and often, and that bodes well for fantasy, purely based off volume.
I like it. Yeah, man. Aaron Jones, dude. I think he got a little bit in the past. He's gotten a bad rap, too, because you're always worried if he was going to be splitting care, which with A.J. Dillon. So that was always something that you had to watch out for. But now with the new squad, like you said, not a ton of confidence in their quarterback. I think they'll rely on the run a lot more, which can only bode well if you got Jonesy.
And we've seen, too, like last 3 games of the season, or whenever he gets going and gets that hot streak going, he's tough to stop, and he will find the end zone. So hopefully he can, get that going early with the Vikings. But as we've talked about in the past couple episodes, I don't feel very good about the Vikings this year. So we'll see. But if he's getting touches, that means fantasy points and opportunities to get fantasy points. So.
All right, I got a guy we've talked about before who I know everyone is going to blast me for this, and I'm either going to be able to talk shit for after this season into next season, or I'm going to have to die on this hill. But Christian Watson at 92, at ADP 92. I know.
I love Christian Watson.
Has burned. I know he's burned so many people in the past.
Burned the shit out of me last year.
I know he's burned me too, but we talked about it. He took the proper steps to try to figure out his hamstring issues, get those resolved with his symmetry and proper strengthening, which he wasn't doing before. If he stays healthy, I think that at his size, 6'4", 210 pounds, he is a deep threat, which just means yards out the wazoo, and he's an end zone threat, which means points out the wazoo. I like Watson. I know people love Jaden Reed right now after what he did at the end of last season. I don't think he's going to be able to sustain what he did. I think that with Watson back and the other members of that wide receiver room, I think he has a great chance at being a top threat. And at ADP 92, now if you told me, hey, grab him at 50 something, I'd be like, maybe leave him where he's at. But at 92, I think he's someone that could change the game for you. And down the stretch, if they're playing well, I think he's a good play. Good play.
I like it. I
So,
like Watson. I can't wait to see him finally dominate because he should. Like you said, just a huge body presence. He's obviously had rough luck last year staying healthy. That's why I don't like. Not that I don't like him. That's why I'm a little salty towards him because he did burn me last year because he was my wide receiver too, and he just would not play for a while. And I was like, God damn it! But that's just fantasy luck, and that's how it goes. But I like him a lot this year. I think Jordan Love and him will have solid connection. Yeah, Watson's a no-brainer, especially like you said. If you get him anywhere near 92, yeah, would you reach for him?
Well,
No, but man,
that's the thing, right? Can you find the guys who got hurt last season but are going to come back and crush it, and everyone's going to let them fall, versus the guys who stay hurt and you just keep making the same mistake. I think with what we've seen him do to try to better himself, I think he will come back stronger. Now, he may miss a game or two, don't get me wrong, but I haven't seen anything come out about hamstring issues in camp. They usually, a lot of times they'll come out then. And so I'm placing a bet on
I take
92. I like
You should bet his over yards for the year. Let's see what happens. I'll look into that. I'm going to look at his receiving prop and his touchdown prop, and I'll get back to you. And maybe we'll sprinkle some money on it. Who knows?
Sprinkle
A
a
little
something,
something.
something.
I'll go, and I got another wide receiver for you as well. ADP 103. And we've been dogging the Panthers a little bit here, but I love Deontay Johnson at 103. Dude is a route running savant when he gets it going. Granted, he is in his past two fantasy seasons, he's only averaged 11 points. Granted, he was having Kenny Pickett throw the ball to him. Sorry, Kenny, you got small hands. You don't know how to find your best wide receiver. And I'm going to leave that at that. But I love Deontay Johnson. He averaged 8.3 targets a game in his first 5 seasons with the Steelers. That's a great number, especially on a team that used to have a lot better wide receiver core when Juju Smith-Schuster was still relevant in the NFL, who, mind you, they just signed with the Chiefs again, which I think is crazy. But I like Deontay Johnson. He is obviously the clear-cut wide receiver 1 for the Panthers. Do I think you're going to run him at a wide receiver 2 clip? No, but he could be a great flex option for you. And it's crazy, like you said, but same thing with Chuba Hubbard, getting him at such a low ADP, and he's the clear-cut number 1 option in their backfield. Same goes for Deontay Johnson on the outside. The fact that he's wide receiver 1 and is 103.4 is somewhat ludicrous to me. We'll see how Bryce Young develops this year. Like I said earlier, Canales has revitalized 2 quarterbacks' careers before, come to the Panthers, and Baker Mayfield, who beat the Eagles last year in the playoffs, and then Geno Smith, who also won Comeback Player of the Year. If we're going to stick to the trends like I normally like to do, I have a feeling Canales is going to make Bryce Young into what we all expected him to be. And if that is true, then Deontay Johnson will only reap the benefits. Again, should you reach for him anywhere higher than whatever, the 8th, 9th, 10th round? No. But if he's still around and just kicking, I wouldn't mind at least stash him on the bench and see how Bryce Young develops in the year. And if you do need to slip him in at a flex spot, I think he could definitely have some games where he gets 10 plus targets a game and does well for sure.
Yeah, I like that. I've had Deontay Johnson on my team last year, actually. And there were some games he actually saved my butt.
There you go.
He was a little inconsistent 100%. For sure. But like we talked about, when you have Kenny Pickett throwing to you, that's bound to happen. But if he gets one in the end zone, you're good. So he's like you said, he's a great route runner. Excuse me. Great route runner and can definitely get it done on the field. So I like that. I'm going to give you a little twofer right now. Okay. Give me one of the 2 big guys that's getting the ball from Josh Allen. Because at number 106 and number 121, Keon Coleman and Curtis Samuel are way too low to be on the receiving end of Josh Allen because that guy loves to throw the ball. And Curtis Samuel having just absolute being in a trash organization last season, still was at 9.9 yards per reception. He had 613 yards, nothing crazy. But now you got Josh Allen throwing to him. And yes, he's dealing with a turf toe, and we'll see how that pans out. But at 121, I'm willing to take that chance. Keon Coleman was specifically chosen by the Bills. There were other guys still available on that draft board who were considered better than him, but they saw something in him, which tells me that he is going to have a big role in that offense. And at 106, I like it. I like taking him and plugging him in, maybe in a flex position there, certain weeks, seeing how he does. But yeah, I'll take either of those guys if you.
I like that. I like Curtis Samuel a lot. He was one of my, I think it was 2 weeks ago when we did that. He was one of my sneaky plays. Like you said, he's done well in a terrible organization in the Commanders last year. Sorry about that. And anyway, the thing that I like the most about Curtis Samuel is that they also, at least in Washington, we'll see what they do in Buffalo, they did like to do some design runs for him, which can also just increase volume and ability to score fantasy points, which I love. He also should be wide receiver number 2 in that offense behind Keon Coleman, or could potentially turn into wide receiver 1 and they just keep flip-flop, whatever. But like you said, Josh Allen does not have Stephon Diggs anymore. He doesn't have Gabe Davis. He doesn't have these safety valves, if you will, type players on the outside that he can just rely on when he gets in trouble. So we'll see what happens there. I'm worried a little bit if the Bills will become a little more run heavy just because they don't have guys like that on the outside. But then again, they have Josh Allen under center. Why would they run the ball when they have an absolute cannon of a gunslinger at the field?
They do have Dalton Kincaid.
True.
That does give me a little bit. I know Josh Allen likes to throw to him. I know he's going to be take up a lot of the target share, but I still think where those guys are going.
100%. And again, at them being in the 100s, I don't think you could go wrong with either of them. And every year, there's always one rookie wide receiver that breaks out. Maybe it's Keon Coleman. You never know. You know what I mean? So last year was Puka Nacua. This year, it could be Keon Coleman. And if anybody has ever seen any highlights from him at Florida State, his big play ability in terms of spectacular catches is bar none. So he's an absolute animal. And he's a very funny dude to listen, just talk, because he's so genuinely he's just so genuine, even when he's not trying to be, but that's just who he is. I was about to call him dumb, but he's not. He's just funny. That's all. Yeah, no, he's a good dude. You can tell he wants to play football and enjoy life, which is a beautiful thing to see. So, moving on from Keon Coleman, my final one is Jerome Ford, 39.3 ADP for running backs, 111 overall. I like Jerome Ford a lot, like we talked about earlier with Nick Chubb. He is the clear-cut running back 1 in Cleveland. Last year, he had 204 carries for 813 yards and 4 TDs. Not crazy, but for the fact that he's had to step in week 2 after Nick Chubb went down with that terrible knee injury, he did very well. He had some very high explosive fantasy point gains. A big thing with him, too, he had 363 rushing yards after contact, which I love because he's a short, stocky guy like Nick Chubb, but is just an absolute bruiser of a back. He did have 51% of the snap share in 2023, so obviously they like to flip. They were splitting time a little bit with him and some of the other backs in there now, but now it seems like he is clear-cut number 1 and will just be the absolute workhorse for them this year. I also think the Browns will continue to be not fully run-heavy, but they do like to run the ball, especially with the way Deshaun Watson has been playing and his availability health-wise last year. Obviously, he didn't play for the majority of the season. I think the Browns will play how they do, which is hard-nosed football and establish the run well and early and often. And in PPR, at least last year, he averaged 12.4 fantasy points a game. So what more do you want from a guy? That's solid. I like that a lot. And it seems like, at least from my perspective, from looking at the numbers, he only has upside for me. Even if Nick Chubb does come back, we'll see how much they utilize him right off the bat and how he comes back from another gruesome knee injury. Best case scenario, obviously Nick Chubb plays well, but if you do draft Jerome Ford late, you could stash him, and maybe if they do end up splitting carries and going committee, maybe Jerome Ford will be the guy that finds his way into the end zone more. We'll see.
I like it. Yeah, I'm always for if you got a guy who is coming in for someone who's injured, especially like we've talked a lot about Chubb. He's a beast, but you just don't know what it's going to look like when he comes back from that injury. And like you said, even if we know for a fact Jerome Ford is going to be that guy for 4 games, so right off the bat, that's great news. And then after that, it's going to take Chubb a little bit to come back. He's not just going to come back and most likely and bust out 100-yard games. It's just that's not what happens normally. I think Ford will still have a massive, significant role in that offense. And it's the same kind of thing. People are probably going to be taking Chubb before him, even with him out 4 games. So you just grab him, and then
the dream would be you get Nick Chubb at a reasonable pick, and then somehow sneak in Jerome Ford there as your backup, and then you're sitting pretty well. Especially for a Browns team that was 6th in the NFL last year in rushing attempts. Like I said, they like to run the ball, and if he's clear-cut number 1, which he is, man, might as well take the gamble, especially late in the draft at 111 or more.
Yep. All right, I guess final. I have an extra one that I threw in there. That's not really mid-round. It's more much later round. But my last mid-round one is Jackson Smith-Njigba, ADP 104, as he's kind of wide receiver 2 after DK Metcalf over there in Seattle. We've already talked about I like Grubb. I think Ryan Grubb is just an offensive-minded genius over there. I think what he's done with young wide receivers, Adunza, and then you look at where Penix is at quarterback and where those guys got drafted. I think he knows what he's doing with young wide receivers there. Jackson last year had about 17% of target share, ended at 628 yards. I think this year he'll have a much bigger role. And at ADP 104, I think he's someone that you can get down there will have a big presence on the field. Maybe not every game, but he averages 10 yards a reception. I think he's a good pickup and could definitely help a team.
That fits so well. That literally is the perfect segue into one of my 3 way too high ADP guys, and that's Tyler Lockett at 46.6. I have no beef towards Tyler Lockett. He's been a great deep ball, small, short, deep ball guy for the Seahawks for a long time. Obviously, Russell Wilson loved just chucking that thing up for him, and he'd somehow end up with it in the end zone, especially being double covered. That is far behind him now. He's 31 years old. I think at least last year I've noticed he was slowing down a lot. And like you said, Jackson Smith-Njigba is quickly becoming the wide receiver 2 in Seattle, as he should. He's a phenomenal route runner and very shifty. And honestly, what Tyler Lockett was at the beginning of his career, but few and far between. Lockett did have 4 straight 1,000-plus receiving yard seasons going into 2023, and then not drastically underperformed, but he almost had 900, 5 TDs. He averaged 11.3 per catch, which all sounds really good to me. I just think the regression is going to continue, and that's why I think his ADP is way too high, especially at 46. Like a 4th-round pick, late 4th-round pick. I just don't like that, at least in a 10-man league. And obviously DK Metcalf eats up majority of those targets, and I think, like you said, Smith-Njigba will continue to get a higher target share. I have no problem with Tyler Lockett. I just think Father Time is catching up to him, and I don't think you should take him at 46. That just seems ludicrously high for me. I think he'll be very underwhelmed with what he does this year. Will he have maybe 1 or 2 games where he catches a deep ball for 60-plus yards and gets in the end zone? I'm sure. But I don't think you can rely on him at that ADP to produce what he should be at that number.
He probably won't get hurt because he's Mr. Fallback once he catches the ball.
That's true.
But no, I would agree. That's high. And it actually matches up based on, what you said, how he's, who he's splitting targets with. My first way too high ADP is at number 27 overall ADP, Nico Collins.
I was looking at him. I was looking at that too.
Yeah.
I was looking at that too.
He's a great player. Don't get me wrong. Crushed it last year. I actually had him on my team last year. Did really well. However, if you look at his stats and when he killed it, a lot of it was closer towards the end of the season. And Tank Dell went out. So he became that guy. I think they had a little bit of trouble. If the Texans had trouble, it was definitely a little bit more in their backfield. So he was the one that they picked to rely on. They are now a different team, right? They have Stephon Diggs. So you're now splitting with Diggs. Tank Dell is back. Yes, Collins is a great wide receiver, but I think it's going to be at where he is and where they're taking him. I think it's way too high. Now you also have Joe Mixon coming out of the backfield. I just think people are taking him way too high. I think if you can get him in the late 30s, 40s, maybe that makes sense.
What did you say he was 26?
But at 27, 26, 27, way too high.
Yeah. I agree with you as well, and I love hearing everything you're saying and what I'm about to say as well, because in a keeper league that I'm in, I picked up C.J. Stroud off the waivers last year, so I get to keep C.J. Stroud, and I'm losing my mind about it because of everything you just said. The mouths that have to be fed in that offense now is outrageous. Tank Dell's coming back. He's phenomenal. Like you said, Nico Collins came on the scene late in the year because Tank Dell got hurt. And now they have Stephon Diggs. They have Dalton Schultz, who I think could be a little sneaky tight end pick later down the year because he's definitely a great red zone target and was drastically underutilized in Dallas, in my opinion. But that being said, yeah, the Nico Collins being 26 is definitely way too high, purely based off of who knows what the target share is going to look like in Houston. I feel like it's just going to be very inconsistent, whether it's Stephon Diggs throwing a tantrum on the sideline because he's not getting 10-plus targets a game, or Tank Dell, or I just feel like it's just going to be a smorgasbord of this week Tank Dell has the majority of the share, then it's Nico Collins, then it's just not going to be reliable enough, in my opinion, to at least warrant taking him that high. That's crazy. That's like wide receiver 2 ADP, which I don't think will happen. Obviously, looking at who they got, I think Stephon Diggs should get the majority of the target shares. I'm sure he will, but you never know. I didn't really think Tank Dell was going to be who he was. And then all of a sudden CJ Stroud said, I'll keep throwing it to 3, and it worked out.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see who he chooses. But like you said, there's a lot of mouths to feed, and I just don't see Nico Collins ending that.
And Joe Mixon can catch it out of the backfield. What are you, man? Dude, it's just if I'm a CJ Stroud owner, which I am, I'd love it. But if I had any other Texans offensive player, I'd be like, woo! It's a little daunting, but we'll see. We'll see for sure.
It's scary.
I'll stick with I have a wide receiver for mine. I think a lot of people are going to chastise me for this, purely based off the hype, but I don't understand why Marvin Harrison Jr. is 15.5 as a rookie wide receiver. That's outrageous. That's outrageous. He's wide receiver number 9 and has never taken a snap in the regular season. Yes, he is a generational route runner. Yes, I know that you really wanted the Patriots to take him over Drake May because you had Jacoby Brissett, but now, of course, Jacoby Brissett is hurt, and now we're probably going to see Drake.
They said he's okay. They said he's okay.
The last thing I saw yesterday was not.
Yeah, because he threw a couple passes after the shoulder, but they said that they took him out to just be careful. He could have kept playing, but they didn't want.
I briefly heard it yesterday when I was doing some work, and I was like, "Oh man, that's crazy that Brissett is." I was like, "Man, they're not going to have a choice." And of course, now today they released Bailey Zappi because he wasn't. Yeah,
it's about time.
Anyway, Marvin Harrison Jr. being at 15.5. I think that's ludicrous, mainly because who's throwing him the ball? Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray's a great quarterback. Let's not get me wrong. He's a hell of an athlete. He won the Heisman for a reason. Was the number 1 overall pick for a reason. But he has not been able to stay healthy as of late. He had a great season 2 years ago, and then ever since then has just been unable to stay on the field, that's just the luck of the draw. But I'm also worried about the Cardinals as a whole. I don't really like that organization and the direction they're moving. It seems like they've just been in a stalemate of trying to keep decent players around, but not really going in any firm direction, it seems. And that's why I don't like Marvin Harrison. Also, everybody knows who he is. Everybody sees that 1-8 walk onto the field, and he's going to get the best coverage guys every game all season. So, again, I have seen clips of him burning dudes in training camp against cornerback ones and twos, but I just don't. At 15.5, that's just way too high for me. If you could get him in the 30s, late 20s, I could understand that a little bit more, but I can't rely on Marvin Harrison Jr. to be a wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2 when he's never played a snap in the NFL. So,
Yeah, what I agree with you on, well, I agree with you. Let's in general that it's way too high. What to play devil's advocate, I would say that people could have said the same thing about Jamar Chase on his rookie year, and he went off for almost 1,500 yards and 13 touchdowns. But the caveat to that was, again, like you said, who was throwing to him, right? Your boy at 62 over there, ADP, who is also a beast in his own right. Is Kyler Murray Joe Burrow status? No, when it comes to passing the ball, right? So I think that's definitely something you have to look at. The other thing you have to look at, and this sometimes plays a part, sometimes doesn't. Some people can compartmentalize, some can't. Marvin Harrison Jr. is getting sued right
That's
now.
true.
So he's getting sued by fanatics, as is his father. Distractions are never good. Like I said, some people can compartmentalize. But when you look at someone like Travis Kelce with all his distractions last year and the Taylor Swift stuff, he came out and performed week in and week out. Some guys, though, especially young guys, have a hard time compartmentalizing. So is that distraction going to take away from his product output? That's something we have to see. So I agree. I think he's going to be good. I think if you can get him at a wide receiver 2 on your team, he may be a good target there. Flex for
100%.
sure.
No question.
But a wide receiver 2, if you get him at a wide receiver 2, I think I wouldn't put anyone down for that. But a wide receiver 1, I'm like, who else was on the board when you took it? Because that makes me worry a little bit.
Wide receiver 2, even for me personally, I don't feel absolutely horrendous about it. It just seems like such a gamble. And I'm such a seeing is believing guy in fantasy for the most part sometimes. I need some sort of sample size. And I obviously saw what he did in college. He was a freak. But I just I don't know. And not even with what Marvin Harrison can do in terms of seeing is believing, like we've already talked about, it's Kyler Murray. So, yeah, and a lot of people are saying, I saw at least a lot yesterday on ESPN and other fantasy websites, they were saying if you can get Kyler Murray late, he'd be a decent pick. But I still was like, oh, man, I don't know. So, anyway, yeah.
Kyler Murray did well in fantasy 2 years
No,
back,
he went crazy with Kingsbury.
Before his injury and everything. But a lot of that was with his legs. It wasn't his own throwing ability too. Yeah. So that's I wouldn't be taking Marvin Harrison off of Kyler Murray's throwing ability, that's for sure. Though that does bode well with my next pick, which the only reason I said he's way too high is because of his quarterback, who we talked about, Derek Carr. Chris Olave is too freaking high. ADP 25 for Chris Olave. Crazy. And you're talking to someone who loved Chris Olave last. I was all about him. This is his second year. Take him. He's going to be great. 25 is too high for Chris Olave. I'm sorry. No way, no how am I taking him at that position. He has great games. I think he's a great receiver. I think he's a great route runner. I think he gets open. He's had some issues with concussions in the past. You always got to worry a little bit about that. Is he taking those huge hits, and is that going to be something that when he gets 1 or 2, the next one becomes 3, and now we start keeping guys out longer and longer, which means that he's not playing for your fantasy team. And I think Chris Olave is too high. Again, I'm with you on the Marvin Harrison thing. If you can get Chris Olave in late 30s or early 40s, sure. Or later than that, of course. But 25 is too high.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I know I said I think the Saints will cover the spread in week 1. Who knows what they'll do from then on. I mean, but yeah, Olave at 25. I saw that. We've been looking at these rankings for weeks, and they haven't been changing much for the most part. And some of these things, I'm like, what is going on here? What do they know that I don't? It's like when I look at the lines for Vegas, I'm like, what do they know? It's a joke I was saying to my friends, where I was like, what do they know that we don't? Oh, that's why they're Vegas. But and that's the beauty about fantasy football is you can have Matthew Berry or any of these guys that are experts, and they can just flop sometimes. And I could see that being Olave. There's a couple. Everybody's very high on Breece Hall this year. the third pick overall. I like Breece Hall. I think he's going to be a workhorse again, and he is. It's just interesting to see. But that this goes into our flow today has been good. I talked about him earlier. Anthony Richardson at 5.5 is crazy. And per our boy Field Gates, who I hope is recovering well, I finally saw the video of how he hurt his shoulder yesterday. Dude sold out, which was ridiculous. Dude's talking about a football guy. That's a football guy. Field Yates has him at freaking QB3 in his rankings. That's crazy to me.
Dude, they like him for his mobile ability, man. That's what it is.
That's crazy. He also, I can't remember how many games he played in college. I think it was like 10 games or something in college or something like that as a starter. Granted, he's obviously not a rookie anymore, and he's been in the league and he's coming off an injury. But I just think, I don't know, from what I've seen in the preseason from him, and obviously last year was not a freak injury, but that happens. I think he's going to be a great quarterback for fantasy. I wouldn't take him as QB3, especially if you are worried about him getting hurt. Like what you just said, he's a great mobile quarterback. That's not how you don't get hurt in the NFL as a quarterback. You know what I mean? So hopefully he's learning how to slide, not eat as many hits. But if you want to take Anthony Richardson as the third QB off the board, you can miss me with that. I'd take Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. I just don't. I don't know. It's just, again, I would take him top 8, but I wouldn't take him at number 3. And that's just me.
I agree that he's too high there. I would say that I think he's going to get some. Not only is he mobile, but the Indianapolis Colts defense worries me. So I think they're going to be playing from behind sometimes. So I think they're going to let him air it out some. So for fantasy's sake, that obviously is super helpful if he's your quarterback. So that's something to think about. Where that ADP is, yes, I would agree that it's too high. But I do like him overall, and he's actually one of the people I've looked at, targeted for my team, if I can get him lower, just because I like where he's at.
100%.
From a just like what he's got for a position, who he's throwing to, all that kind of stuff.
And hopefully Josh Downs will come back nice and healthy. Obviously, they have Michael Pittman Jr., who's a stud. I love Michael Pittman Jr. I had him last year, and he was nothing but consistent for me. A little worried about him if Downs is out for a significant amount of time and misses some time, a lot of time, because obviously then Michael Pittman will just keep getting doubled. But, we'll see. The Culture, interesting team this year. If Anthony Richardson can find a rhythm and play good ball, they could very well be a playoff team again. But like you said, their defense is shoddy. And if you're playing from behind every game and you got to throw the ball 40 times, that's not how you win football games.
For sure, dude. For sure. My last one that I have is Devon Achane. They got him at freaking ADP 20. Which, what? No way. I know he went off last year, but he really went off for 3 games, if you look at it. 3-4 games. He had 800 yards on the season, and 400 of those yards came in 3 games. So, sure, if you catch him on a streak, he's going to be great for you for that streak. But overall, that doesn't make him a reliable RB for your team and a reliable RB1. Not to mention, he's behind Raheem Mostert, who had 18 TDs last season, is a horse when you get near the end zone. And he's got Jalen Wright behind him, so who's speedy, fast. I don't think that he's going to have even close to the year he had last year. I think people are putting him way too high. I think Miami's going to use him sparingly. Yes, he is a great running back. I shouldn't say sparingly. They'll use him, but I don't think he's going to be what everyone thinks he's going to be. I think that where people are drafting him is way too up there. I think if you can get him much lower than that, then great. But I think he's at 20.
I was going to say, especially for a running back at an ADP that high, he better be the clear-cut number 1 go-to back, and he obviously is not. I think the Dolphins, as we saw last year, like to use him as a little bit of a change of pace, a 1-2 kind of thing with him and Mostert. But I agree with everything you're saying. At 20 and he has a guy in front of him, that's ludicrous to me. Unless Mike McDaniel comes out and says he's the clear-cut number 1, I would not take him that high.
And he's got a guy above him and
Yeah.
below him. Jalen Wright's no.
Totally. So,
You know,
talk about a running back by – and the same thing, too, is as we saw last year, it's not like it's a running back by committee for the most part. I mean, especially once they get into the red zone, they give it to – that committee turns into Raheem Mostert pounding it up the middle. So it's not like he has a lot of red zone target share, if you will. So, yeah, at 20.
Talk about mouths to feed.
Crazy.
Like you said, they've paid Hill, they've paid Waddle. Now you got these guys. It's just – I just don't see it. Not that high.
Not that high
No
for
way.
sure. If you can get him 5th round, frick it, dude. That sounds sweet to me. Put him in at a flex. He'll probably get a touchdown every other week, something like that. That sounds good to me. But, yeah, you cannot rely on 20. He's looking at frick. And, dude, that's potentially an RB1 if you go wide receiver first, depending on what draft pick you have. You know what I mean? That's crazy.
Yeah. There you have it. Those are our way too high. I got more guys on everything, but we are getting close to time here. We're actually overtime, but we still have to get to the player props for week 1. So
they're no brainers.
So Willie P, give us the player props.
You're going to hate this one because you hate Big Red, but he's the boy, especially for old Patty Magoo. Travis Kelce, anytime touchdown score, plus 115. That seems like free money to me, absolutely. Plus money for Kelce to get in the end zone is ludicrous to me. Obviously, it's not something crazy like plus 150, but Kelce has scored a touchdown in week 1 in the past 3 seasons, excluding last year because he did not play. And I guarantee you, if he did play last year against the Jets, he would have had one. I'd put the mortgage on it. But yes, I love it. Kelce at plus money to score a touchdown week 1 against the Ravens. We saw what he did last year against the Ravens. He's their kryptonite, so I don't trap.
We know I don't love Travis Kelce for all the outside distractions and humble brags, but you don't root against Travis Kelce from a betting or fantasy standpoint of that. People have been saying he's going to drop off for years, and he just comes back and just keeps crushing it. I like it.
Yeah, now he's going into year 2 with Taylor, so who knows? Maybe this year, if he has a good year, he'll propose, but who knows, man? He's a wagon. Next one, Jalen Hurts over 238.5 passing yards for week 1. His last 2 week ones, he's hit this over by at least 10, 15 yards, so I like that as well. The big reason why I picked this is, 1, because he's fully healthy coming into this year. 2, they did just get Jahan Dotson a couple days ago, so he has yet another target to throw to, and we know what Jahan Dotson can do, speedy on the outside, exactly what the Eagles like. I don't think Jalen Hurts will have any problem going over this passing prop in week 1. I think he's ready to show the rest of the league that he's fully ready to go and that this whole noise around him and Sirianni having a fractured relationship is not true. And the only way he's going to do that is by having a good game. And I think a lot of people tend to forget, too, Hurts has a heck of an arm. When I saw 238,
dude, that team should win the Super Bowl, if we're being honest. That should be a Super Bowl. And they should definitely be in the Super Bowl, and they should win the Super Bowl, if we're being honest, and with the team that they have.
That was the first line that caught my eye when I was looking at it yesterday. I was like, 238. Like, if it was like 275, something closer to 3, I was like, man, I would have been a little more weary. 238 to me just seems ludicrous and how low that is. It's minus 115. I'm sure it's going to change. It'll probably – I would be shocked if it moves in favor of the under by the time we get to Sunday. But, yeah, 238 seems like an absolute cakewalk for Jalen Hurts, especially since he's done it in the past 2 years. And my third and final one, especially with Jahmyr Gibbs being hurt, David Montgomery, anytime touchdown. It's minus 125, so it's not like it's juiced up to the max. You'll still be making profit. It's not anything where close to CMC, who is still hurt. Even though he is still hurt, his anytime touchdown prop for week 1 is minus 180, which is outrageous because Vegas finally learned from last year of giving CMC touchdowns way too much value that they kept bleeding money. But David Montgomery at minus 125 to score a touchdown in week 1, I love. He was an absolute workhorse for them in the red zone last year. Heck of a goal line back, just a big body that can find his way into the end zone. 10 out of his 13 rushing TDs last year were in the red zone. So that just shows you he's their number one option for when they get in there besides Amon-Ra. But I think the Lions will pick up exactly where they left off last year. And the moment they get inside that red zone, who it's going to, and that's David Montgomery. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
I
I think Jahmyr Gibbs is supposed to practice this week. I think he's going to be ready for week 1. But with that said, like you said, he's their end zone workhorse. Montgomery is. So I still like the bet. I still think you take that. There's no better feeling than when you take a bet like that, or in fantasy when you have the running back and you watch like Amon-Ra St. Brown or someone catch the ball and go out on the one. It's almost better than the actual touchdown and getting the points. You just watch them go and get tackled at the one, and you're like,
that's the
hell
closest
yeah.
I feel I'll ever be to an
Here it
NFL head
comes.
coach because I'm like, I know what's coming. They don't even, it's like anybody last year that had Jalen Hurts. Because anytime they'd get on the 2 or the 1, it'd be like, oh, even the announcers would be like, oh, we know what's coming. We know exactly. And then it would work. And it was just like, dude, God damn it. And that's why I had DeAndre Swift in one league. And I was like, I'm getting cooked out here, man. He's never going to get a look. And he wouldn't because it always worked. So this year with Saquon, I think that'll change with Saquon. I think he's going to need a lot of red zone touches, especially from the 5 and within. But, yeah, that is the best feeling when you're like, I know exactly what's coming
The
here.
best, dude. Oh,
just give me the points right now.
But there it is. Montgomery. Take him. Ladies and gentlemen, that is an hour and a half of pure football brilliance right there. So many picks, tips, tricks, all the data, just to make sure that when your draft comes, you are ready to go. I have the second pick in one of my drafts this upcoming, and my other one I don't know yet. We have not figured out the draft order yet, but it's going to be an exciting year. There's a lot to do, a lot to go on here, and I'm excited for fantasy. So thank you for joining us, and we will see you next week with another episode of the Frisky Risky podcast. For all your news, updates, betting information, make sure to check out all our social media platforms, our website, www.thepredictors.com, and join our newsletter for even more betting picks from the man himself, Willie P. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week.